Welcome students. Within this video I'm going to be talking about the sensatory system, hence the senses that we have. So hopefully you're using one of the major ones, hearing, and hopefully you're doing beyond just hearing me, you're actually listening to be able to understand how this system works. So got to introduce, of course, Manee. He's always in the picture. Now, you're not going to be used as much, but I definitely will use you in some because you have the senses just like we as humans have. So we're going to be talking about eyes. Okay, eyes are very important, the two of them. We're going to be talking about your nose, okay, smelling. We're going to be talking about hearing, okay, hearing and balance. Okay, so when he's swimming through the water, he knows where he be. Talk about taste also. So we've got 5 main senses we're going to be looking at. Those are going to be the special senses of the body. Now we'll have some other senses, which are also 5, are these general senses, such as touch and pressure and pain, hot and cold, okay, kind of knowing where you are in time and space. Now, when we're talking about the sensatory system, always be remembering when we talk about senses of like where are we getting our senses from, okay? The sensatory system is all about awareness, okay? A sensor is something that detects, okay, it's a stimulus, the internal or even external. Mostly we think of the external, but either external or internal far as that stimulus. Now those are sensors, those are going to be the cells. So when we talk about receptors, cell receptors, is you should be really thinking about the word of a cell receptor. It's a special cell within the body that receives information from some type of stimulus. Now remember, what carries that then is a neuron. Okay, a sensatory neuron carries that information to, remember, the central nervous system, okay, the brain and the spinal cord. So all of these various cells throughout the whole body receive information and then send it to the brain and the spinal cord. And then that area then is going to interpret what it feels and what it sees. Now, receptors are classified according to the type of stimulus that they receive information from. So if it's a chemical, again, it would be chemistry that they would be receiving. Maybe it's pain, so obviously we have pain receptors throughout our whole body. Temperature would be hot and cold. Mechanical relates to balance, okay, knowing when he's swimming and where he's not swimming. And then photoreceptors would be the ones within our eyes. So definitely be thinking about when we think about receptors, they're cells that receive information various ways. Now, there are 3 things I want you to be thinking about as we talk about the special senses here in a minute. Now, number 1 is the name of the receptor. Okay, it's going to have a very special name beyond just photoreceptor, chemical receptor, and such. You got to know the name of the cell. Now, number 2 is you got to know the name of the sensatory neuron, okay, the nerves, okay, more precisely the cranial nerves you got to know. Then lastly, the 3rd thing you need to know is the area of the brain, the lobe of the cerebrum that what information would be received in. Now, so the special senses that we're going to see in a couple demos here are going to be vision, so we're going to look at the eyes. Okay, the parts of the eyes and how the eyes work. Number 2 is going to be hearing. Okay, along with that we'll throw in number 3, which would be balance of our ears. We're going to look at the parts of the ears and hearing. Number 4 would be taste, so we'll look at the tongue. And then number 5 is going to be smell. Now, I'm not going to focus on this video by any intensity when it comes to the general senses, but definitely know what the general senses are. The general senses are pressure. Okay, so when you're touching, the pressure receptors within the integumentary system, remember the dermal layer, okay, those corpuscles that detect the pressure, also detect the touch, if it's light touch versus heavy touch. Temperature, which is hot and cold, and pain. But one thing I will mention also too, and there's one more I'll talk about here in a second, which would be proprioception, or better known as sense of position. When you think about all of these different cells that receive information, pain is the only one that does not adapt. Meaning, think about when you walk into a room and you have a smell, or someone comes into the room with a smell, eventually the cells in your nose kind of turn down the dial. Even though the smell might be the same as far as the level, your nose actually will kind of turn. It's almost like a dimmer switch. But pain is the only one of our cells in our body that you have to take away the problem for the pain to go away. It does not have a dial switch, okay, that could turn up the pain or turn down the pain. Okay, now we can numb the pain, we know, such as oral or on the skin type of medication, but pain receptors do not adapt. Okay, when we think of sensations themselves, so definitely be thinking about those three things you got to know. Okay, so the special senses are the ones that I want to focus on throughout the video, but make sure you are still looking at those general senses and understanding how the general senses work. And the last of our general senses is the sense of position. Okay, receptors found in your muscles and tendons and joints help to say, okay, don't go too far, don't hyperextend this particular area. They're also called proprioceptors. It's the word receptor is in the word proprioception. Okay, it literally means helping us to determine where we are in time and space. Okay, so like if you're spinning around, yes, we have an equilibrium part within our ear. Those are also can be considered proprioceptors. Okay, it helps us to, in the inner ear, to know where we are if we're laying on the floor or if I'm standing upright. Okay, so know the generalnesses of the general sense, but I'm going to be directly focusing on our special senses. Okay, so the special senses are very important for you to know. Now, the first one is going to be your eye. Now, here in a minute, you're going to see the demonstration with my little Play-Doh, okay, to help you see the different layers of the eye. About 70% of all of our sensatory receptors, these cells, are in our eyes, okay, so that's why I'm really going to focus on talking about the eyes, because they are that important. 40% of all our cerebral cortex is going to be focused on vision. Okay, itself. Now the eyeball itself, I'm not going to get into depth, and I did not in the Play-Doh demonstration here in a second show you far as the eye, far as the parts that protect the eye. But definitely when you think about the eye, there are areas to keep things out of the eyeball, such as obviously we have the bones. Okay, so kind of go back and look at the skeletal chapters in your book and look at those areas as far as those names of those bones. But we think about our eyelids and our eyebrows and our eyelashes. Okay, those are protective structures to keep things out of our eyes, rinsing our eyes. Now also think about, of course, tear ducts. We have the lacrimal glands that help to cleanse through tears. We actually have several different types of tears. And then lastly, you'll see also too when you're reading information about the conjunctiva, the conjunctivitis. Okay, think about pink eye. That's going to help. It's going to be a membrane that's going to help to line the eye, to keep the eye safe. Okay, but obviously when we think about the whites of our eye, that's the conjunctiva. And that area, of course, if we get infection in it, that's when you're going to see the inflammation that is going to occur. Now when we're talking about the layers of the eye, we're going to look at three different layers. Okay, you're going to see sclera, you're going to see choroid, and you're going to see retina. Now they also can be called tunics, and tunics literally means layers. Okay, the sclera is going to be the outer layer. The choroid is going to be where we find the blood vessels. Okay, it's highly vascular. And then the deepest layer is where the cells, the receptors, are going to be found, okay, within the retina itself. Now, definitely when you're reading, be thinking about there's several muscles, and I'll talk about like the innervations of the cranial nerves within the demo, but there are inside and outside muscles. Okay, the extrinsic muscles move the eyeball. Okay, again, thinking up and down, left and right. Okay, the intrinsic muscles are the ones within our eye when we think about the iris movement. And the iris is the colored part of your eyes that allows that pupil, that black hole, again, to dilate. Okay. Or get more constricted, okay, the hole to get bigger or the hole to get smaller. Now, nerve supplies, there are going to be a total really of 5, but this book I'm in and I'm teaching from actually talks about most of the 4 that you should have known from the cranial nerves from last video. Watch under the last video when I talk about the CNs, okay, the cranial nerves. So number 2 is the only one, cranial nerve number 2, optic, that affects your vision. So you have 2 eyes. Number 3, number 4, and number 6 relate to that motor movement. Okay, so definitely make sure. Now the 5th one, kind of throw it in there, would be the vagus. Okay, the vagus has a direct effect on the iris itself, as far as letting more or less light in through the pupil. All right, students, within this demonstration, we're going to look at the structures of the eye. So, of course, we get the cranium here, and then coming off of the cranium is going to be the neurons. Okay, so that's the reason I picked the gold, to relate to the neurons that attach to various parts of our body. Now, the cranial nerve number 2 would be the one that we're talking about with this particular neurons. So this would be a cranial nerve number 2, which is your optic nerve. Now the optic nerve runs into your eye. Of course, your eye would be inside the eye sockets. Okay, and as far as colors here, to make it a little bit easier for you, I made yellow, referring to the outside of your eye, and this is going to cover the whole eyeball. Okay, but again, when we think about wrapping up something, the yellow is going to relate to the most outer layer of tissue covering your eyeball. That's called your sclera. And your sclera is one of what also they call the tunics. And tunics is just another name again for layer. And within this layer, we're going to find also of the sclera is the very front that you would see out of is going to be your cornea. Okay, it's just an extra membrane that protects our vision, and then the whites of our eyes are going to be the sclera region, is going to be the conjunctiva. And again, you think of conditions such as conjunctivitis, pink of the eye, okay, or if you get blood vessels that you see that are broken in the whites of your eyes, or if you get red eye, that is going to be the sclera region. Okay, again, it covers up, and I haven't covered the whole eye so you can see it, but again, that golden color is going to be your sclera. Now, the choroid is going to be the next one, and I made it red for a reason, because it is the region that is very vascular as far as a tunic and layer, so meaning that it has a lot of blood vessels. Okay, it's very delicate connective tissue, and also it's going to have a little bit of that melanin in it. That's that dark pigment, okay, that absorbs light rays and prevents them from reflecting within the eye. So within this region, you're going to find another area that I went ahead and put here in the green for an eye color is your iris. Okay, we'll talk about the iris here in a minute, but iris is going to be the part of your eye, your colored part, that's going to have muscles in it to help control that black that you see there, that pupil, of whether that pupil is going to let in more light or let in less light. And then the last layer, that is going to be the blue. Okay, so sclera, choroid, and then the blue is going to relate to our retina. Okay, and your retina is the areas where you're going to find the special photoreceptors. And again, receptors, like I mentioned earlier, are going to be those cells that bring information to a nerve to bring it to the brain, so the brain can process it. So anytime you see receptor, no matter where we'll talk in the body, a receptor is just a special types of cells that's going to send information through a nerve to the brain so the brain can process that information. So far as areas, sclera is on the outside, choroid is the next layer, the middle layer, and the deepest layer is going to be our retina. Now the retina is very important, and I want to show you here just a little demonstration of what those parts look like. So inside of your retina, and I've got a red and a green to help you inside that deepest layer of your eye before it gets to the optic nerve is going to be two different types of photoreceptors called rods and cones. And rods and cones are very important. Now when you think of the cones, think of color, C for C. So the color part, okay, that's going to allow when light passes in here, and I'll demonstrate it here in a second, when light passes in, it's going to help us determine what colors we're seeing. Now the rods are a special type of photoreceptor that is going to allow us to see in black and white. Okay, so two different types of photoreceptors that are connected, that directly connect to the nerve, and then of course in this case you see it continuing on the nerve to the brain. Okay, so it helps our brain to determine what is going on. Now, other things to remember about the eyeball is going to be, of course, we have muscles, okay? So on the outside, okay, of that sclera region, that's where we're going to find attachments for the various muscles that cause our eyes to go left, right, up, or down. That's important. But the iris is going to be the area inside that muscles are going to attach to that allows, of course, that hole to get bigger or that hole to get smaller. So here are the 3 layers separated to help you. Sclera is the outermost layer, choroid is the middle layer, and then the retina is the third, which is the deepest layer. Now, within the retina is where we're going to find those photoreceptors, your rods and your cones, that are attached to cranial nerve number 2, your optic nerve. But don't forget that you have 3 other cranial nerves, number 3, number 4, and number 6, that are the cranial nerves that affect the movement. In your sclera on the outside, you have muscles that attach that help your eyes move left, right, up, and down. And then inside on the outside of your retina area, within the choroid, you're going to have your iris, and remember the iris is going to help to control how much light that comes into the pupil. So again, 3 different cranial nerves you definitely don't want to forget about, but the only one that relates to vision problems would be the optic nerve number 2. Now, I've disassembled the parts so you could see them individually as far as the coatings, because I really want to focus on the blue, which is our retina. Now, within our retina, we have the special cells called photoreceptors that send the information through the optic nerve to eventually send it to the back of our cranium. Okay, so if you were to turn this around and look at the occiput, that's the region of the brain that that cranial nerve number 2 is associated with. Now, with that said, as that light comes in to your eye, it's got to, of course, go through all 3 layers. Okay, now it's got to go through your sclera, your choroid, and then eventually gets into the deepest layer of your retina. And again, within your retina, then we're going to find those photoreceptors and the optic nerve. Now, as light comes in and goes through all 3 areas, it is eventually going to get to those photoreceptors, and the red and the green are relating to the different types, your rods and your cones. Now, in between these layers is special fluid. Now, there is liquids within your eye. Some are a little bit more watery, okay, such as a water, and some of them are a little bit more thicker, so think of a gel substance. So again, the cornea is going to be on the front, okay, as light shines into your eyes. So if you want to use like a flashlight, okay, as light is going to shine into your eye, it's going to have to go all the way through all those 3 layers to get to your retina. And then once it's inside the retina, it's hopefully is going to shine then on the photoreceptors to go through the cranial nerve into the occiput region of our brain. So as the light is shining through, it's going to have to shine through some of that liquid, okay? Now think about on your windshield. If your windshield was dirty, then you would not be able to see it of your windshield very well. So think about these fluids that live within our eye structure, that if that is cloudy, then that's going to prevent the message to get from here all the way through those 3 layers and then eventually to our brain. So the brain's not even getting the message correctly. So when you think about that fluid, the different types of humors, know that in between, again, the fluid and those photoreceptors is, I put a pair of glasses, are some lenses. Okay, these lenses that are typically called the crystalline lenses are a clear circular structure actually made from firm elastic material. The lenses has 2 outward curving surfaces and is described as biconvex. The lens is very important because it's going to help in something we're going to talk about here in a second called refraction. Now, as the light shines into our eyes, it has to go through the cornea. Okay, remember the cornea is the front part that protects our sclera region, okay, that first coating that it protects, of course, the choroid and then eventually the retina. So the light's going to shine through. And remember, if this is cloudy, that's going to prevent the message getting to the brain correctly. So as it shines through the cornea, it shines through a liquid, a humor. Then the pupil, the size of that pupil makes a difference. Okay, so if that pupil is not dilated enough, not contracted, not letting enough light in, then still the message could get lost in translation. So as that light shines through the liquid, goes through the cornea, the pupil is open enough, then it still has to go through a lens to allow that information to correctly get to the photoreceptors. And then after it goes through the last liquid and gets to the photoreceptors then are going to translate that information hopefully correctly, because everything before it was allowing the information to go smoothly. So again, the pathway is cornea, through a liquid, through the pupil, through a lens, through another liquid, to get deep inside of the retina to that one particular spot. Now, refraction is one of the two ways that our eyeballs work to help us see clearly. Now, refraction is the bending of light waves as they pass from one substance to another or at different distances. So such as if I zoom in, you can see really closely here, and the camera is keeping very focused. Okay, as I'm getting closer, you notice how it's blurry a little bit, then the lens is trying to focus on that particular area. Such as if I get really close, you notice that things get very blurry on the camera. So refraction is done through lenses. Now you have lenses within your eye, but if you are born, and a lot of times it is kind of a birth defect where your lens is on the inside and even your eyeball is not shaped properly, lenses including contact lenses on the outside can change the way that your eye refracts that light to get to the photoreceptors, to get to your brain to be clear, and have that clear vision reception. Have that clear vision coming through getting the proper information down the chain of command. So again, I'm not expecting you to be experts, okay? Hopefully that little demo helped you to see the parts of the eyes, and I talked about, of course, the rods and the cones, okay? I'm not expecting you to be ophthalmologists by any means, but you got to understand, again, those three things. The name of the cell, okay, photoreceptors or rods and cones in your eyes. Number two, that when you think of vision, okay, number two is the optic nerve, and then of course you could also be thinking about the other three cranial nerves that move the eyes, help with that. The vision is number two, and the last thing is where it's going to the lobe of the brain. It's the occiput, the occipital lobe in the back of your cerebrum. Now, the two types of ways that we see are called refraction and accommodation. Now, refraction is when the light comes in, it's a bending of the light rays, and it helps the light to shine in one particular area within our eye, okay? And it has to be in that layer of the retina, okay? So when it shines back, it should directly point to one spot, okay, and touch. It should not cross, okay? Meaning that it needs to hit that precise spot and not kind of overlap. Now, in order to refract the light back, remember it has to go through those certain areas. Okay, and I would have showed you within that video, that part, the demo of going through all those different liquids, going through the lens to get to those photoreceptors. Now, if refraction errors that we think about, things that could go wrong, would be those disorders. So when we think about problems, disorders that affect the vision, definitely think about the errors of refraction are farsighted and nearsighted. Okay, they usually come from, of course, you probably have heard the word even astigmatism. Okay, usually these errors of refraction are coming from the result of an abnormally either short eyeball or an abnormally long eyeball. Okay, in that situation, the light rays, when they come in behind the retina, because of the lens cannot bend enough, would cause us to have problems where we can't see either close or we can't see further up. Hence why we get contacts or glasses on the outside to change refraction as it is happening. So that is refraction. Now, accommodation are when the lens themselves change shape to accommodate that refraction. So think about when I'm looking at something further away and I'm looking at something close, the difference between it being very cloudy or clear, or cloudy or clear, nearsighted or farsightedness. Now, the lens itself has muscles that wrap around it. So definitely think of like a circle, okay? And coming off of that circle, attaching to my lens inside of my eye, there are these little strings. Now, those strings are ligaments coming off of those muscles. So very similar to think about when your skeletal muscles move, okay? That same type of action. It's a change that happens, okay? It causes me to be able to move my arm when my skeletal muscles move. Now, in your eye, those lenses, those ligaments that are being held on to the lens, when the muscle contracts or rounds, okay, a rounding is going to happen. Okay, so think about a contracted muscle in my eye. And again, this is dealing with the iris when we're thinking about letting the light in and out. Okay, it's going to help with refraction, again, letting more light in or less light out. No, those muscles are going to contract. That causes the lens to become rounded. That helps us see things that are close up. Okay, so, you know, if you wear glasses, you kind of maybe already know kind of the thickness of them and how they're convex or concave does make a difference. And on the opposite side of that, when the muscles are relaxed, the lenses go back flat. Okay, so think about when you're pulling something back. I've had a lens here, it's going to round it this way. Okay, and then when I relax, it goes back to its flattened state. The flattened state is going to help us to see things that are further away. So think of like a microscope. Okay, if I'm holding a microscope in my hand, okay, and I want to look at something, okay, that lens, and maybe even your car when you see it, things are closer than they seem in this mirror, okay, that is also that type of thing. So again, when it's flattened, helps me see things further away. When I round it, it's kind of like I'm pulling stuff closer so my eye can be able to see it. Okay, so hopefully that's a good visual for you to be able to see the difference. Again, I'm not going to get into a lot of detail in this video, but refraction and accommodation have to deal with the lenses, okay, but it also has to deal with how the information is even getting to the lens and then what's happening to the lens to continue that information back correctly to our retina. Other problems, of course, you could have for the eye would be, conjunctivitis. Okay, I talked about that earlier with any type of infections that involve or injuries. Obviously, if we scrape the cornea, it's going to prevent and have a cloudy message as it gets back. Think about kind of old school when you had not a digital dial on your radio, but you would have to turn the dial and you get between stations and it sounds really kind of fuzzy. Think about that when you're seeing. If something is fuzzy, either it be the liquid or the lens is scratched or there's too much pressure, it's going to prevent problems from that message getting from the beginning to all the way back to the retina to the photoreceptors. So think about even conditions such as cataracts is a cloudiness. Okay, view it like a dirty windshield. Okay, when you think about that. Think also too if you have those three layers and if layers separating, okay, such as the retina is detaching, okay, left untreated, that's going to have like spots that would come up. Of course, could almost be like a blister that would happen within the eye. Macular degeneration, again, is the number one cause of blindness. And that's where that area, the yellow area of the retina that contains that one particular spot is being distorted or covered. And that's preventing the message from getting to your cranial nerve number 2. Now the next part we're going to talk about, we talked about the eyes, okay, being able to see. The next part we're going to look at is the ears. Okay, so the ears you're going to see in this little demonstration. I'm going to show you the parts and talk about the names, okay. Think of outside versus middle versus inside. Okay, there's going to be 3 different layers and 3 different names that we're going to look at. So you definitely need to know those 3 different layers. I'm also going to talk about it within the different names of the cells. Okay, so the cell names in this case for hearing is going to be the organ of Corti. Okay, that goes to number 8. Okay, that's the cranial nerve, and then that goes to the temporal lobe. Okay, now I will give you a hint. The last 2 are the same with balance. Okay, except with balance, it's a little bit more different. Okay, of these hairs that are within our ear, we do have some crystal salts that lie within that area. The maculae area; those are going to be the names of those cells. Now we're going to talk about the ear. So 3 names in 3 different regions that you definitely need to be aware of. first one is going to be the outside of your ear, external ear, which is going to be called your auricle or pinna. Okay, same name. So pinna refers to the outside of your ear. Now there's a canal, okay, in the middle, and that canal in the middle is going to be called the external auditory canal. Okay, so the external auditory canal. Now I'll put some little pieces here so you can kind of see them, okay, within that outer ear in that canal. This is coming from your gland in your outer ear, okay, external ear, called the ceruminous. Okay, the ceruminous gland secretes cerubin, okay, better known as earwax. Okay, that's where you're going to find earwax within that canal. And then the last of the three names in your outer external ear is going to be your tympanic membrane, better known as your eardrum. So those three areas are the outer external ear. Now after that, you're going to find these three guys, and I'm just going to put them together in your middle ear, called the ossolates. Okay, now the ossolates, the names are going to be malleus, or you could also call it mallet. Okay, malleus would be the hammer. Okay, that's one of them. Ingus is going to be the second bone, and the third bone is the stapes. Okay, so these three bones together are going to be your ossolates in your middle ear. And also don't forget, in your middle ear, this is where you find that auditory tube. Okay, again, if you ever had tubes put in your ears, that connects with your throat and pharynx. Okay, so there is a little tube that would run off of this area. It allows to kind of allows the pressure to be equalized on both sides of this tympanic membrane, and of course the window we'll see here in a minute, and that's where you feel, you know, like the changes of pressure that can happen. That tube helps to alleviate that pressure, but also too, it's an area that sometimes has to be drained if there's too much liquid within that region. So external ear, three names. The three names would be the ossolates in your middle ear. And then lastly, this crazy looking thing here in your inner ear is a labyrinth. And within this labyrinth, we're going to find three different names. So the inner ear is where you're going to see here in a minute that the cranial nerves are going to attach. So these guys right here in this beginning section, okay, is going to call the semicircular canals, the vestibule, and the one that looks like a snail shell is the cochlear or cochlear region. So we've got the semicircular canals, the vestibule, and connecting with that also is an area called the cochlear region. So the regions again are the pinna, the external ear, the canal, the tympanic membrane. Okay, remember the tympanic membrane is your eardrum. The three bones called the ossolates, the vestibule and the semicircular canals, and the one that looks like a snail shell is the cochlear. And then lastly, in those regions, we're going to find hearing and balance. So cochlear region, or cochlear, connects up to the nerve that goes to your temporal. The vestibule and the semicircular canals also connect up to this nerve, number 8, the vestibulocochlear nerve, that connects directly to the temporal area. So this is about equilibrium, balance, and this one is about hearing. So I've had to turn around my little semicircular canals in the vestibule and the cochlear because he's this adorable snail figurine. So as information is received over here, goes inside of your pinna, through the auditory canal to the tympanic membrane, these little bones called your ossolates are going to vibrate in response to your eardrum. And then that's going to send coarse information through the fluid that lives within this cute little guy. But that fluid is going to help balance and help determine whether that vibration, you heard something that was loud, something that was soft, okay, or what type of movement occurred is going to then send that information eventually to, of course, our cranial nerve that eventually sends it back here to this guy, the skeleton and the temporal region, for you to be able to hear what I have just said. Now, far as balance, when all that information is received in the cochlear region, that is going to send a vibration through that fluid up that division of the cranial nerve, and then of course down cranial nerve number 8 into the brain. Now remember, the other region is called the vestibule semicircular canals, and the same thing is going to occur. So as that information is received and goes through the fluid within that region, then it goes through that branch and eventually goes down the cranial nerve number 8 to the brain to translate whether we are sitting up or laying on the floor. Okay, it's the one that affects, of course, if you were to have vertigo within this region is where that would be experienced from, as far as the information being sent to the brain. Now, deep within both of those, you have small hairs. Okay, now within the cochlear region, you're going to have an area, these special receptors. Remember, receptors have special names. The receptors within the cochleae, or the cochlear region, these little receptors are going to be called the organ of Corti. Okay, that's very important. You definitely need to know that that is the name of the receptors that receive the information to send it to cranial nerve number 8 to the brain. Now, within equilibrium, we are referring to the semicircular canals and the vestibule. Those little receptors are called the macula. Okay, the macula move, again, in response to the information, the vibrations that are coming from the ocellates. And of course, you go further down the chain, then that would be coming from the eardrum, and then the information that came in through the pinea. Now beyond the macula, you also have some hair cells within this region called cristia. Cristia are hair cells that are embedded in a gel substance, and again, as you move your head, they're going to bend in relationship to that movement, and it's going to, of course, relay that information of whether you're spinning or you are standing still. Now, after watching that little part of the demo, some disorders that I definitely want to mention. You think about any itises, okay, if you get an ear infection, of what part is it affecting the middle, okay, or the externia, okay. Hearing loss is any time when we're directly affecting the cranial nerve number 8, okay. And then other conditions you could think about as far as equilibrium would deal with vertigo. Now, the next part I want to talk about, and you'll see a demo for also, would be taste. Okay, the name is gustatory. So gustatory refers to you being able to taste with your taste buds. And again, we know we have the sweet and the sour and the bitter and the salty. We also have sometimes a metallic taste that you can get, and then umami, which is that meaty type of taste, also associated with our taste buds. But when you're thinking about gustatory, okay, so again, knowing the name of the cells, gustation, okay, gustatory is the name of the cells. Definitely be thinking about, again, where it is going through. Okay, now in this one, we have a couple that we're going to deal with because taste buds themselves affect number 7, number 9, and even number 10 when we think about the sensations of taste, okay, itself. So the sensations of taste. So that could be facial, the glossopharyngeal, okay, and your vagus. Okay, so like what it feels like in our mouth, but also the taste of it is very important. Now, as far as areas that are affected, usually those taste sensations goes to the brain's lower frontal cortex, okay, that region within the cerebrum area. The next thing we're going to talk about is the sense of taste, and the sense of taste is, of course, going to come from our tongue. Okay, it's going to come from our tongue. Now, within the tongue, we have these little guys, these papillae, okay, that, there's little bumps on your tongue. And if you were to take one off and magnify it, you're going to find that in each one of those, you find these even smaller little areas. And then I magnified it even more to kind of help you to see there that these little small things are called your taste buds. Now, your taste buds are directly attached to a cranial nerve. Okay, now that cranial nerve, there's actually 3 of them that helps to determine taste and the sensation of taste. Now we know we have receptors for sweet and salty and sour and bitter, but there's also ones as far as taste, far as umami, which is kind of that meaty taste that you find in some food. So there are different types of taste that we definitely have. Now, those receptors then will send information through the nerves of taste to your facial and your glossopharyngeal cranial nerve, and also number 10, your vagus nerve, can help to interpret that taste and those taste sensations. But gustatory cells are the name of the receptors. Those special receptors, then those taste buds, send information to cranial nerve number 7, cranial nerve number 9, and cranial nerve number 10, which eventually, of course, relays that information to the brain, the different types of taste and the sensations of taste. So even the way that the food feels within your mouth is sent through these cranial nerves. So when you think about gustatory, maybe think of Gus's chicken, okay, whatever works for you. But Gus, we're going to see, goes with the sense of smell, and the sense of smell we'll look at here in a second is going to be called olfactory. So gustatory cells and olfactory cells work together. Now the last of our senses is going to be smell. Okay, so we've talked about eyes, we've talked about mouth, we've talked about ears. Now let's look at the nose. Okay, now the nose is olfactory. So olfactory, think of going into a factory and smelling something. That's the name of these cells. So olfactory is the name of the cells, and you're going to see a demo that's going to show the nose here in a minute. Now think about cranial nerve number 1, olfactory, and then think about the area that it is going to go to. So in this case, actually part of the temporal cortex, but it also goes to your limbic system. So that's why there's a direct connection. If you remember what the limbic system is, it's the emotional brain. Why there's a direct connection between smells and emotion. So think of the last time that you smelled something. Maybe it was a chocolate chip cookie, or maybe it was a certain perfume and reminded you of somebody, hopefully pleasantly. But also when you smell something and then it's like, oh, that reminds me of somebody, and not a pleasant way. Okay, so there is a truth when they come to smells invoke emotions, because there's a direct connection to your limbic system. Now the next thing that we're going to talk about for our senses is the sense of smell. So our nose, as things are breathed up into our nose, and you go deep inside of the nose, when you get past these different little layers, okay, that's going to help to warm up the air that we breathe in, we're going to find little hair cells, okay, and these hair cells are called olfactory cells. And once that information, we have thousands of these different cell receptors that sends the information through a cranial nerve, of course, to our brain. So again, gustatory we talked about with the mouth. Gustatory and olfactory cells like to work together. So think about the last time that your nose was stuffed up and it was very hard to taste things. Okay, and they're very close within where they are within our cerebrum, but the nose is going to be olfactory. So olfactory is the name of the special cells deep within our nose that sends the information to the cranial nerve, and the cranial nerve is cranial nerve number 1, olfactory. Okay, of course that's going to relay that information to our brain. So hopefully within this video, these many demonstrations that I've had, I know I've had a lot of them within this video, can kind of help you to connect those 3 things. So the names of the receptors, the name of the neurons, okay, aka the cranial nerves, and the parts of the brain that directly control the special senses that we have. So didn't get to use too many senses today. Definitely, hopefully you are learning more each day and adding on to the knowledge that you have gained at this point, and doing a lot of hearing with cranial nerve number 8. But hopefully you're also using the part of your brain, the frontal lobe, to get all this stuff that you're learning from your short-term to your long-term memory, to help you to keep building on the knowledge that you've already gained. I look forward to seeing you all within the next video.